everyone, so today we're going to discuss if the sun sets you free, you're free indeed, and the number one reason why we should reject medical totalitarianism. Right now we are seeing the encroachment of government officials, health officials, and even those who we know on civil liberties and medical freedom for what we may be hearing as the common good or the greater good. However, is this something that we should support? And to start off, we'll be reading Genesis 25, verses 20 through 34. And Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah to wife, the daughter of Bethuel, the Syrian of Panjanam, the sister to Laban the Syrian. And Isaac entreated the Lord for his wife, because she was barren. And the Lord entreated of him, and Rebekah his wife conceived. And the children struggled together within her. And she said, If it be so, why am I thus? And she went to inquire of the Lord. And the Lord said unto her, 2 nations are in thy womb, and 2 manner of people shall be separated from thy bowels. And the one people shall be stronger than the other people, and the elder shall serve the younger. And when her days to be delivered were fulfilled, behold, there were twins in her womb. And the first came out red, all over like a hairy garment, and they called his name Esau. And after that came his brother out, and he took his hand, took hold on Esau's heel, and his name was called Jacob. And Isaac was 80 years old when she bare them. And the boys grew, and Esau was a cunning hunter, a man of the field, and Jacob was a plain man, dwelling in tents. And Isaac loved Esau, because he did eat of his venison. But Rebekah loved Jacob. And Jacob sawed pottage, and Esau came from the field, and he was faint. And Esau said to Jacob, Feed me, I pray thee, with that same red pottage, for I am faint. Therefore his name was called Edom. And Jacob said, Sell me this day thy birthright. And Esau said, Behold, I am at the point to die, and what profit shall this birthright do to me? And Jacob said, Swear to me this day. And he sware unto him. And he sold his birthright unto Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and pottage of lentils, and he did eat and drink, and rose up, and went his way. And thus Esau despised his birthright. So, just to recap what we just read, Esau came from the field, as the Bible described, most likely from hunting. Jacob was cooking pottage, which is translated as red lentils. And many of us can relate to Esau's condition after a long day. He was tired, he was hungry, and just wanted to eat. Jacob, seeing Esau's vulnerability as an opportunity to get what he wanted, offers Esau a bowl of stew for his birthright. In ancient times, a birthright was a big deal. So it was typically given to the eldest son, and this meant that he was going to be the head of the family when the father died. And he was made responsible for the well-being of all of the women in the household, which are the widows, his sisters. He received the largest part of the inheritance, the most wealth, double what the other male children received. And essentially, the first-born male child received the most power, the most respect, and the most responsibility. However, Esau chooses to give up all of that, choosing a permanent solution to fix a temporary problem. So some questions may come to your mind. For example, wasn't Esau starving? How is it fair that Jacob took advantage of Esau in his vulnerable state? The truth is that Jacob was wrong too. And if you read the rest of the story, you see that Jacob ends up practicing more manipulative and deceptive behaviors, which leads to him suffering many years before he ends up claiming the birthright, which ends up being his. He ends up being deceived himself, which leads to him living with the consequences of his misdeeds for the rest of his life. However, if you read various translations, the type of starvation that Esau was experiencing seems to be more of an exaggerated form of hunger, where he may have missed a meal, or some of us say that we're starving when that means that maybe we haven't eaten all day. Instead of true starvation, where someone may be genuinely malnourished or may not have adequately eaten over a period of time. So it's also important to note that the Bible calls him a skilled hunter. So chances are he really didn't miss a meal or miss many meals. What the Bible is alluding to is the spirit of impatience, where Esau wanted to experience short-term pleasure, but did not adequately consider the long-term consequences. He did not adequately count the cost of his own actions. Because of Esau's hasty decision, not only did he lose out on the birthright, but his descendants suffered as a result, losing generational wealth, prosperity, and repute that they would have had. Also, it's important to note that Jesus comes through Jacob's bloodline and not Esau's. So, a question you may ask yourself is it possible that if Esau had disciplined himself and properly regarded his birthright, would Jesus have come through his bloodline instead? And we don't know the answer to that. But what we do know, because of his indiscretion, is most of what he's done, or most of what he's known for in the Bible, is his lack of self-control, his inability to think about the future, and the consequences that resulted. So another consideration that some of us may have is that God did say that the older would serve the younger. So does this mean that Esau was predestined to sell his birthright? So I'd say this is based off of my personal conviction and what I know based on the Bible. This could have very well been a conditional prophecy. So it did not have to happen if Esau had submitted himself to God and practiced self-discipline. So the reason why God knew this would happen is because, besides the fact that God is all-knowing, is because of Esau's character. Esau was the type of person to live for the moment and displayed a frivolous attitude towards a tremendous blessing. Jacob, although not perfect by a long shot, properly regarded the blessings of God. So the blessing went to him instead of Esau. God will not give you more if you cannot properly steward over what you already have. In fact, the Bible says that when we don't properly steward over our talents, God can take them away and give them to someone who has shown that they can receive the responsibility. So I encourage you to read Matthew 25:14-30 on your own to get a full picture of the parable. But I will read Matthew 25 verses 24-30 so you can get a picture of what's going on. And just keep in mind that, God is very serious about the way we use our time, our talents, and our abilities. So basically this is the story of 3 servants, one who had 5 talents, one who had 2 talents, and one who had 1 talent. And we'll mainly be focusing on the person who had 1 talent. So let's go to 24. All right. Then he which had received the 1 talent came and said, Lord, I knew thee that thou art a hard man, reaping where thou hast not sown, and gathering where thou hast not strawed. And I was afraid, and went and hid thy talent in the earth. And lo, thou hast that is thine. His Lord answered and said unto him, Thou wicked and slothful servant, thou knewest that I reap where I sowed not, and gather where I have not strawed. Thou oughtest therefore to have put my money to the exchangers, and then at my coming I should have received mine own with usury. Take therefore the talent from him, and give it unto him which hath 10 talents. For unto everyone that hath shall be given, and he shall have abundance, but from him that hath not shall be taken away even that which he hath. And cast ye the unprofitable servant into outer darkness, and there shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So to give a perspective for the servant who had 10 talents, initially he had 5. But what he did is that he invested his talents, he worked on his talents, and God gave him 5 additional talents that he did not previously have. And so what we see is that God regards those who waste the resources, the talents, the gifts that he gives them as wicked. So we must be mindful about how we regard the gifts that God has given us. We should not just treat them as common. So going back to what we were initially going to talk about, freedom is a gift from God. It is not something that the government gives us, but it is our birthright. Unfortunately, there are many countries that haven't been able to enjoy the same freedoms that we take for granted daily. But what I have observed is that even for those who haven't grown up in a place that is necessarily free, or places that where they have very oppressive regimes, there is still a yearning in the hearts of some of those who haven't experienced freedom for freedom. So it's as if God has placed or hardwired the desire for freedom in the hearts of man, and that is because God made man with free will or freedom of choice. God made man with as I said, freedom of choice. So we can find this throughout the Bible. And for example, we can see Genesis 3, where God made man to choose whether he wanted to sin or not. He had the choice whether to sin or to obey God. So if God does not force the conscience, then who is another man to do so? So unfortunately, we see in countries today that are attempting to force the conscience, even in countries that were once considered free. For example, Germany is attempting to ban those who have not received the from accessing most venues. What is most important to note is that those considered fully V'd lose their status after 9 months. So for those who think that 2 or 3 shots is going to be it, well, unfortunately, that's only the beginning. So Austria and Greece are essentially planning for a compulsory V's. And, for those who do not get it, specifically in Greece, they would be fined 100 euros, and they're specifically targeting the elderly population, those over 60, until they do get the V. So who's going to be affected disproportionately? Well, those who are poor. The South African president, Cyril Ramaphosa, says that it is a way to help to restore social freedom. So basically what he's saying is that the V restores social freedoms. But it's important to know that freedom is not contingent on getting an injection. So freedom is a choice. You were born free, but you have to reclaim the birthright that is already yours. So the only way to do that, or the only way that these unjust mandates and unjust policies, such as preventing those who have not received the V from buying groceries and fuel, or receiving rations in an Indian state. It starts with an A, but I don't want to mispronounce it, so I'll just put the link in the comments below. Or preventing teachers from getting benefits. To work is for a large percentage of the population to be on board. So basically, in order for these mandates to work, you have to go along with it. Those who are working, those who, running the stores, employees, we all essentially have to go along with it. The mandates cannot work if we do not agree to them and do not comply with them. So to conclude, I hope that it's becoming clear that the trajectory of where we are going is a further removal of rights and the privacy of those who not only live in America, but live everywhere around the world. So we see biometric systems being set in place. It's set up in India. This was done since 2018, but now we can see through the V passports that this can easily be expanded. Australia has been putting the indigenous who don't want the Vs, those who have tested positive for you know what, and even those who have not tested positive in quarantine camps. And of course, I've told you previously about the shielding approach. I've told you about bills going through New York, such as A99. We have this going on in Ohio, I believe Tennessee as well, bills to establish quarantine camps. So everyone has to make the decision for themselves. If they want to sacrifice their birthright, their freedom, for safety. For some, it may not be worth it, and for others, it may, So we have to remember that the choices that we make today will not only impact us, but our children, if we have any, or if we plan to have any, and generations to come. So how do we want to be remembered by our posterity? And are you willing to sacrifice your birthright for a bowl of stew?